I recall the Friday before my sister was murdered. She called me that Friday, and she was at work, and I knew she was at work, and we had been on the phone while she was at work for almost an hour, if not an hour. And then she says, I said to her, "It's getting dark." And I knew that she was afraid to walk to her car by herself. There was either the security guard at work or a co-worker would walk to her car with her. Or sometimes she'd take her co-worker's car, and her co-worker would take her car for fear that he was somewhere watching and following her. And so I said, "It's getting dark. And so let's get off this phone, you know." And then she said to me, "I really need to talk to you." And I thought at that moment, "You've been on this phone with me almost an hour. What is it that you haven't said to me?" So I said, "Okay, you know what? I'll come home before Christmas and we can talk then." Then I said, "Oh no, I'm not coming home for Christmas, because if I come home for Christmas, you guys are going to be trying to talk me into staying for Christmas, and I don't want to do that." I'm consciously aware of what I'm saying. But even in my conscious awareness, I didn't move on what I was aware of. And I said, "So no, I'm not coming home before Christmas." And she said, "My sister was killed on December the 18th. And we buried my sister on December 23rd. And I was indeed home before Christmas." We saw early on, just from anecdotal data, in addition to those that were actually reaching out for mental health related services, that there was an increase in domestic issues. Because suddenly people were at home with COVID, right? And many of them were at home with people they didn't like too much, right? They've just been coexisting. What's also interesting is that sometimes abusers don't recognize that they are abusive, right? And sometimes victims of abuse don't always recognize until it becomes a more intense issue that they're victims of abuse. There are some do's and don'ts, right? And oftentimes we have the tendency to want to ask a lot of questions, and I think we need to be quick to listen and slow to speak, and wait. However, I don't think that we need to wait for them to come to us, which is a mistake I made with my sister. But I don't think we should wait for them to come. I think that again, when we recognize the signs and symptoms, we do need to say something. I don't think we should be judgmental. Don't blame the victim. Don't give advice in terms of if it were me, this is what I would do. But to lend an ear, to provide support and help in addressing the situation by, for example, how can I help you? And to the extent that I, as a mental health practitioner, can help you, then I will. But if you're a lay person, like a minister, to the extent that help might be, let me make, here are a list of potential sources that in the community, or resources in the community that could be of assistance to you. I think that those are some of the ways to support their decisions to an extent that you can. And what I mean by that, to the extent that you can, I'm not going to agree with you when you're wrong. I support that you have I respect and support that you have the right to make your own decisions and to chart your own course. I don't have to necessarily agree with it. And to understand the difference in that when I support your decision, it doesn't necessarily mean that I agree with your decision, but to support their decision. I hope that answered.
No, that was great. So I know it's not binary, but what is the impact that domestic violence can have on a survivor and their support system, or rather within their support system?
I took the time to just This is my sister. She is my youngest sister, Melanie Dawn McKay Straughter. And on December the 18th, 1994, Melanie was brutally murdered by a former boyfriend. She was axed to death, leaving behind 2 children, then 5 and 6 years old. And it is, didn't fully understand at the time the impact, and that the impact would be so, has such a lasting effect, because the impact may sometimes fade or may not be as intense, but I don't know that it ever goes away. For me, it wasn't just simply losing or the death of a sibling. It was almost like the death of a child. And for my children, it wasn't simply the simple death of an aunt or an uncle. It was like the death of a sibling. My family, this constant absence of her presence, right? And then the constant reminder of how she died, and you ask the question sometimes, why, given the kind of person she was, because she was as beautiful on the inside as she was on the outside. And I used to often say she perfected the art of motherhood, because she was such an excellent mother, which also I think that when she began to talk about the abuse or even mention the abuse, I think it had reached a point where it was affecting her children. And I think that when it came to just her, that was one thing, but for it to impact her children, that was on a whole different level. And I think that at that point is when she spoke up about it. And to talk a little bit about the effects of the children, because I want to be transparent about the effects that it not only has had on my family, but how it has affected her children, dealing with mental health issues themselves, anxiety, depression, experiencing issues of domestic violence themselves, as the victim and as abusers, dealing with low self-esteem, dealing with bullying and being taunted by peers because where's your mom, or what happened to your mom, and the constant questions, right, about what happened to their moms, or the absence of your mom or your father, because your father's now serving time as a result of his substance use. And so you're living with your aunt. Why you're living with your aunt? Those constant questions that can continue to bring up the memories. And when memories come back up, they come with thoughts and emotions too, right? Is now 30 years old, but still experiences nightmares from the event, because they were initially present, but my sister tried to leave the home and run. She actually ran to a neighbor's house, and he came into the neighbor's house and finished the deed, right? And so my nieces, my nephew were there to witness, the beginnings of this traumatic event and to deal with the abuse themselves. But I guess one of the most heartbreaking things for me is to know that my nephew committed an act of violence that resulted in him now serving a 25-year sentence. And I wrote the judge about, one, I thought that he had some learning difficulties that had not been diagnosed. I know that they did not go through counseling as they should have as a result of their mother's tragic death, as well as being separated from their father as well, and his substance use and abuse and relative behavior. And I shared with the judge about the incident of my sister, which I wasn't in the courtroom, but other family members another family member that was in the courtroom said the judge came out and talked about the letter that he had received, and that he did the research himself to read about, my sister's murder. I feel that we have to talk about it. There was this avoidance to talk about it. There was shame, in not recognizing the signs, or recognizing something wasn't quite right and not doing enough about it. When you recognize the signs and symptoms of abuse, like isolation, like being withdrawn, not having the freedom of liberty to move about, not having your own money. You see those controlling issues, right? And in recognizing them, to speak about recognizing them, to say, hey, what's going on? Or to say, I'm not talking to you as much. I don't see you as much. What's going on? I noticed that you're not as active. I noticed that you seem to be withdrawn. You seem quieter. I noticed that you avoid certain conversations and places. Let's talk about it. I cannot emphasize enough the importance of being aware of the signs and the symptoms, and to the extent that you can intervene and provide assistance. I'm not asking you or suggesting that you step in between people fighting, but the extent to which you can assist, we have to do more to increase awareness and to remove the stigma associated with talking about being a victim, right? My sister shouldn't have been ashamed to talk to me or to my mom or any of her siblings about this, because something is being done to you. And sometimes people are ashamed because they feel that it makes them look weak. If there is some shame, I'd rather you be shamed than to be dead.